and welcome back to the channel where it is time for another Saturn versus PlayStation video. Today you'll see from the title that we're taking a look at the multi-format game Hardcore 4x4, which came out towards the tail end of '96 on both systems. We're going to be taking a look at how it looks, how it plays, how it sounds, and of course what kind of content and lifespan it's got on both systems and which version comes out on top. So as we started with the Saturn first last week, we're going to start with the PlayStation first this week, and I was relatively surprised when I loaded up Hardcore 4x4 because it ran and looked far better than what I remember it being like when I originally played it on the PlayStation. The graphics aren't actually too bad, the textures are pretty decent on the tracks as well, the trucks look okay, and the game runs at a relatively decent frame rate. There's no major slowdown. Even when multiple cars are on the screen smashing into each other, the game actually runs pretty decently. All the courses look varied. There's loads of different weather effects as well, which are great, but unfortunately they make the game harder to play. But in the looks department overall, the PlayStation version of Hardcore 4x4 isn't actually that bad. Moving on to the Saturn version, and unfortunately it is the total opposite because this game runs absolutely shocking on the Saturn. It runs at approximately half the frame rate, I would say, of the PlayStation version, and I have got absolutely no idea why. I said it in my review of Hardcore 4x4, this game came after Sega Rally, and that runs fantastic, and this game runs shocking. The trucks don't look as good, the textures on the courses are pretty ugly on the Saturn version in all fairness, and the weather effects are hideous on the Saturn version. It is just mesh effect everything, and it is utterly disgusting. We've got mesh effects for the shadows, mesh effects for the effects when the cars go through mud and stuff. This game is one ugly Mother Hubbard because it just looks hideous. And it runs hideous as well, and we'll go on to how it runs later on because it severely hampers the game in other ways as well. So in the looks department, it is an absolutely smashing victory for the PlayStation. So moving on to the sound effects and the music, we're going to take a look at the PlayStation version first, and there's no real issues here. The sound effects within the game are absolutely fine. The voiceover, he's slightly more frequent than what I remember on the Saturn version, and the music, although it's very generic, is perfectly pleasant to listen to whilst you're racing around and smashing around the courses. So in the sound department, there aren't really any issues at all for the PlayStation version. Sandblasting now. Moving on to the Saturn version for the sound and music, and it's not really anything different here. The music is the highlight of the Saturn version. I think I said that in my review a long time ago, and I'll stick by that now. It probably is the best part of the game. The only downside really for the Saturn version is the commentary is far less frequent, and he seems to have less lines to say, which means based on that and that alone, the sound and music department is also won by the PlayStation. It's very, very close because the games are really similar, but the fact there is slightly more commentary on the PlayStation version means the PlayStation version comes out on top here as well. Go for it. So we're going to take a look at the PlayStation for gameplay first, and Hardcore 4x4 plays relatively well on the PlayStation. It's quite responsive, there's no real issues with the control setup or anything at all. It plays quite well. It plays exactly like I'd expect a big 4x4 truck to play or control like if I was racing it around a course, and I've got no problems with that. The problems with the gameplay come when you're on tracks with terrible weather effects or nighttime tracks. They make the game almost unplayable, and when you're playing the championship mode, you can't select any of the weather conditions, which means you'll be racing around tracks and you basically can't see where you're going, and that is a shocker because it doesn't matter how good the game controls. If you can't see where you're going, you're going to be screwed, and there's no map overlay on the screen, so you don't even know the direction, the shape of the courses, and this is a huge gameplay issue. So overall, whilst the game actually is fairly responsive, there's big problems in the gameplay department. So moving on to the Saturn version for the gameplay, and what you need to do is take away all the good things that I just said for the PlayStation version and amplify all the bad things by 10, because Hardcore 4x4 on the Saturn plays absolutely terribly. It really does. Even at the best of times, the truck is so laggy and unresponsive when you're controlling it. It makes it impossible almost to win races. It is a shocking game to play, and when you add in the horrific weather effects which increase the lag further, or nighttime racing, this game becomes almost, actually no, it does become unplayable. It's an unplayable mess, and it brings you zero enjoyment whatsoever. It plays shockingly bad. There's nothing that's redeemable about the way that Hardcore 4x4 plays on the Saturn. So in the gameplay department, the PlayStation comes out on top yet again. So moving back to the PlayStation for content and lifespan, you've got several trucks to pick from. They've all got varying statistics. You've got several tracks as well, and they are actually quite varied in terms of what they look like, the weather effects that are on each course. You've got a championship mode, a single race, and a time trial as well, but the big negative is the fact there is no two-player split screen, and of course in racing games that is a massive thing. You're not going to invite your friends around to play a one-player game, so in that regard the lifespan is really numbed down quite a bit. And of course the single-player experience will really be determined by if you can put yourself through the races where you can't see where you're going, whether in the dark or you've got terrible weather effects, and for me, I don't see myself doing that. There's no enjoyment in those, so the lifespan department for Hardcore 4x4 on the PlayStation isn't really that great. Moving back to the Saturn, and everything I've said on the PlayStation really applies here as well. Of course, we've got the same options, the same tracks, the same cars, no two-player, but of course the lifespan is worse on the Saturn because of the horrific gameplay. There can be no denying that this game brings zero enjoyment to play. Therefore, regardless of whether you've got championship and time trial or anything, you just don't want to play any of them because the gameplay is a crippler. So in the lifespan and content department, I'm afraid to say the PlayStation is going to get a clean sweep this week because it wins there as well. So it will come as no surprise that the PlayStation version is the winner this week. It comes out on top in every single category. The Saturn version really is probably one of the worst games on the system, whereas the PlayStation version just seems to get lost in the pack with all those other racing games on the systems. I don't really think it kind of lived up to its expectation overall. But what are your thoughts on this game in general, and did I get my verdict correct? Let me know down below, and as always, I will be back soon in the near future with another Saturn versus PlayStation comparison. Goodbye for now.